Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another coffee talk, the sixth one of our series. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Antimicrobial Resistance, and I've been contracted by Alberta Milk to conduct some of their research and extension activities. And I'm also a postdoc at the University of Calgary, which some of you may know me from as well. I'm working with Herman Barkema, actually. And a few Zoom use and housekeeping comments will be shared by Jody in the chat shortly. So today we have Herman Barkema presenting about antimicrobial use and resistance in the dairy industry. So without further ado, Herman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Annemarieke. So, and thank you, Alberta Milk, for inviting me to have a coffee talk with you. So I'll first give a short presentation and then we'll have a discussion with Dr. Leighton Coma and JP Brouwer. So this is what I'm going to present is an overview, and part of it is work of some of my PhD students, Kaylee McCubbin and Alan de Jong, and we have some other people also involved in that. Ben Keddy and Julia Bodanese also work as PhD students in our group. Guillaume Liermy is also somebody working on antimicrobial resistance at the University of Calgary, and Jeroen de Buck, you know, he is our bacteriologist and my main partner in crime in most of these efforts. So if we go back to antimicrobial resistance, the inventor of penicillin already warned that the time may come when penicillin can be bought by anyone in the shops, and there's a danger that the ignorant man may easily underdose himself and by exposing his microbes to non-lethal quantities of the drug, make them resistant. So that's what we are seeing in humans, animals, and in the environment. There's a lot of drug use that is not okay, and then we get antimicrobial resistance. But we also get antimicrobial resistance just by use of it. It's not that it always needs to be underdosing or wrong use of antimicrobials. So what is antimicrobial resistance? It is the ability of bacteria that cause disease to withstand an attack by antibiotics. So antibiotics that cannot kill the bacteria anymore that they're used for. So it is an increasingly pervasive issue worldwide. Yeah, of course, they're one of the greatest medical advances of the 20th century. Because of that, we don't worry anymore about small wounds that we have that actually were lethal a long time ago. And also in cows, we got so used to having antimicrobials when we have a mastitis in a cow, for instance, because that typically takes care of it. Or you know, the blanket dry cow treatment has become a standard treatment in dairy farms all over the world. But the resistance may vastly reduce antimicrobial efficacy. And so we have, if we see here in the left bottom corner, one of the 5 bacteria is resistant. Then we take antibiotics, and we of course kill the ones that are not resistant, and most of them, because it's never 100%. And then we get more resistant bacteria, and with more and more antibiotic treatments, we really select for those resistant bacteria. So why don't we worry also about this in public health? Yeah? Now, well, the same antibiotics are used in humans, animals, and the environment. And what is, you know, we don't have to worry on with milk and also with meat that we will bring antibiotic-resistant bacteria or antibiotics to the consumers. That's all tested, and those products are free of antibiotics and of antimicrobial resistant bacteria. However, the most likely way that we from dairy farms are transmitting antimicrobial resistance and antibiotics to people is through runoff water and the rest of the environment. Yeah. So there are many factors contributing to this selection pressure. It's a complicated spread that we have. And of course, if we look at humans, the most important way that humans get antimicrobial resistant bacteria is because of antibiotic use in humans. So if human doctors only point the fingers at livestock, that is just not correct. But still, we are making products that the humans need to consume and buy and consume. So we better take care of everything we do on a dairy farm so that it doesn't harm the public. So increased use is one of the reasons for antimicrobial resistance. Prescriptions taken incorrectly. And one of them is stopping with the antibiotics once you don't feel really sick anymore. Antibiotics sold without medical supervision. We've seen that a lot in the past. That's not the case anymore in the dairy sector now. Preventative use and those feed additives are the worst ones because you really underdose in that and you get quite a selection taking place. Then antibiotics used for viral infections. We saw that COVID-19, the pandemic, it's very non-specific, the symptoms that people have in the beginning. So just to be sure, doctors also put most of the patients on antibiotics, and we have seen a surge in antimicrobial resistance in COVID-19 patients. Then a spread in hospitals and also in farms, but in hospitals we see quite some spread of antimicrobial resistance in bacteria throughout hospitals often. And then, of course, antimicrobial residues that are in the environment. So worldwide, we have at this moment, about 5 million deaths per year because of antimicrobial resistance in humans. In Canada, that's 14,000 deaths per year. That was in the best data we have. The most recent ones were from 2018. So, and each year in Canada, more than 18,000 people get infections in the hospital that are resistant to antimicrobials. So we get an increase in these superbugs, like vancomycin-resistant enterococci, and also in Clostridium difficile. So the WHO is very worried about that and says that we really need urgent action here. Otherwise, we will get into a post-antibiotic era. Yeah? And one of the reasons why that is such a problem is that we have now what they call a discovery void. No real new antimicrobial drugs come on the market. And that's already for more than 20 years. So, and the reason for that is that it has become very, very expensive to develop a new antibiotic. And what happens when you have a new one is that it will be shelved because it will be only used and reserved for patients, human patients, that need it because they have an infection that's resistant to all kind of other drugs. So it won't be available for animals. It will then be available only for a few humans. And that is not cost effective for the pharmaceutical industry. So there are all kinds of discussions going on how to change that. But we cannot expect any new drugs in the livestock industry that we can use. So if we then look at antimicrobial use in livestock, 80% of the antimicrobials is used in livestock. And of course, we need to think a cow is way heavier than a human. So you need to dose a 800 kilo cow way more than an 80 kilo human. So if you correct for that, we still use 1.7 times more antimicrobials in animals than in humans. And most of those drugs are the same as used in human medicine. So then people often say, why would we worry about antimicrobial resistance? Resistance to penicillin was already there before it was invented. But I don't think that really matters. We see an increase in antimicrobial resistance, and it's caused by use. And we, as dairy farmers or dairy veterinarians, are very proud of the product that we produce. And we want products that are seen as produced by healthy, happy cows and that are healthy for the humans to produce. And so there should not be something that like finger pointing at us for antimicrobial resistance. And then also we see antimicrobial resistance occurring more and more in cattle. And you know, as a veterinarian, I want to make sure that we still can use antibiotics when we have a sick cow. And it's another thing that we need to be worried of is we see way more antimicrobial resistance in farming families from the cows. So the transmission is more direct on the farm. So you should be worried about what happens with your children and with your family and yourself. So I think it's important that we should develop a target reduction in the use of antimicrobials. And then, of course, general statements that the WHO, FAO make ban the use of all antimicrobials that are essential for human health. And I think that is really important. But realize that a drug like ceftiofur is one of those essential drugs that we really reserve for people with tuberculosis. So we have to really look at the drug use that we have there. Ban the use of growth promoters, not important for the dairy sector, but it is important in other meat-producing sectors. So we need clear and quantitative goals, and we need everybody to work together so that it's really practical where we come with and see whether we don't want any governmental organizations to tell us as dairy farmers and veterinarians what to do. It really needs to come from us. One thing that we really need to think of also is how can we help the developing world in the use of antibiotics? Because their management is not really as good as what we have, and they often need those antimicrobials. If we don't have farms anymore with a bulk tank somatic cell count of 1 million, and where you have a lot of infections with Staph aureus going on, and Strep agalactiae also. So they really need those antimicrobials, and they need growth promoters because they need to produce protein for their population. And bugs don't stop at borders. So we need to help them as well. So if you then look at the dairy sector where we use the antibiotics, it is nearly 3/4 of the antibiotics that are used for dry cow therapy and for clinical mastitis treatments. So in the other, that's the bulk of the antibiotics that we use in the dairy industry. But can we do something about it? Can we really, stop using antibiotics as blanket dry cow treatment or all case of clinical mastitis? You know, these were measures that I also told all farmers, you know, if your bulk tank somatic cell count is high, you would be stupid if you would not use blanket dry cow treatment on all cows. And you need to use antibiotics in every clinical mastitis case. Well, times have changed. Yeah, that was the time when the average bulk tank somatic cell count was 400, 500,000. We are under the 200,000 now. And with that, we have way less bacteria in the udders of our cows when we dry them off. We can do it selectively. And also, we now have internal teat sealants that we can use, and we have diagnostics that we also can use on farm. So it is possible, we think. So, and that it has been proven in a lot of other countries. So selective dry cow therapy, only giving it to the udders of cows that have an infection in them, is a possibility. And then also treat the cows with clinical mastitis that have an infection that actually can be treated or need a treatment. Because an E. coli mastitis typically does not need antibiotics to cure. And it's only with a Streptococcus uberus, Streptococcus dysgalactiae, with Staph aureus, those kind of bacteria, they need the treatment. But we need protocols for that. However, lots of farms already decided that we have enough information to go to selective dry cow treatment. And we now have with Lactanet even a list that is produced when you're a DHI member of the cows that need antibiotics at drying off. And you see that, like in Alberta, it is nearly 4 out of the 10 farms that already uses selective dry cow treatment. However, they could use some help with it and know better what practices that they should use. So this has increased quite a bit. In 2015, when we did the national dairy study, it was only 11% of the farms that used selective dry cow treatment. So it has increased really rapidly. And if you then look at selective treatment of clinical mastitis, that's done on a lot of farms. But that depends on what you call selective. Yeah? Is it okay? We see flakes in that in the milk of that cow every now and then when we streak some milk out of that cow before milking. Let's not treat it because it doesn't make sense. Let's wait till we dry her off. Yeah, that's done in a lot of farms. But really culturing the milk and withholding it for treatment for a day and then deciding whether this cow needs it, yes or no, is only done on a few farms. So we need decision factors, and we need information is this a cow that is chronic and that we have treated 2 or 3 times already, so let's not use antibiotics. What is the somatic cell count of this cow? And you need DHI information if you want to make that decision. Cow characteristics, is this a very old cow? And there are other considerations to use. So if we want to consider those protocols, it has become quite clear now that if we want to compare selective treatment protocols to treating them all, that there is no difference in bacteriological cure. So you can knock that bug, those bacteria out of the udder. You don't get more clinical mastitis if you do it selectively. The somatic cell count stays the same, and it doesn't affect milk production. So, and if you look for selective dry cow treatment, we can implement that without any negative consequences. So, both will reduce antimicrobial use in the dairy sector considerably. So it can be done. So what farms should implement it? Well, you first need good record keeping, otherwise you cannot decide whether this cow needs it or not. You need a somatic cell count report. You need to know what the somatic cell count is of this cow. Where you get it from Lactanet or you get it from your robot report. That's okay, both, but you need that information. And if you want to do selective treatment of clinical mastitis, you need to have culturing on farm or at the vet practice. But then you need to bring that one sample to your veterinarian, have it cultured, and have the results in a day. So there is some willingness to invest in the equipment of that. It's not expensive. We're talking here about a couple of $100s, not about thousands of dollars. So in summary, already, 1 out of 3 farms use selective dry cow treatment, and the majority uses clinical mastitis treatment selectively. But we still can reduce it, and those farms really need better protocols to do so. So, and this is the best way to prevent mastitis, but of course, this is a picture that's not real. We made this up, or not me. This, I think it comes from Pfizer or another company. Any questions?
Thank you, Herman. That was very interesting. And I think this is a very timely topic, as you already said, and something to definitely think and talk more about. Because as you said, right, both human and animal health is very dependent on responsible use of antimicrobials. And I really like that you also, of course, indicated what role the dairy industry plays in this, but also what we can do moving forward to improve practices around antimicrobial use in the dairy industry. So you gave us lots to think about, and I think it would also, in the next bit of the coffee talk, would be really nice to hear a bit more of your perspective, but as well as JP's perspectives, Leighton's perspectives, as well as some maybe of the attendees. So with that, I would like to open it up to discussion and Q&A. So we have JP Brouwer and Leighton Coma facilitating this part. So JP is a producer in Alberta and also a director of the Alberta Milk Board. And Dr. Leighton Coma is a dairy vet in Alberta, and he graduated from the Western College of Veterinary Medicine in 2009. Let me see. So thank you for already turning on your videos. I'll join you again about 5 minutes before the end of the webinar. And JP and Leighton, just to kind of get you going here, we were wondering, maybe you could give your perspective on what an ideal conversation on antimicrobial use would be looking like to you between a veterinarian and a producer. Could you give some of your perspectives on that?
Yeah, I guess when it comes to dealing with producers, a lot of times guys will ask me, which medication is the right medication for treating this disease? And I say, a lower importance, like maybe a biomycin. And they'll say, that has a milk withdrawal. Can we use XNL, which has a very high importance? I say yes, but then there's a milk withdrawal. I guess some of the question for Herman would be is, what's the best way to approach that situation when there's milk withdrawal versus the right antimicrobial choice?
So I think we should not leave those decisions to the farmers and the veterinary practitioners themselves individually to make. If we are going to decide as a sector with the dairy veterinarians and everybody around it that we are not going to use these highly critical antimicrobials for human health anymore, that needs to be something that needs decided there. We cannot ask a farmer to say okay, no milk withdrawal of a drug that is highly effective. Of course, that would be the first choice to use. Yeah? And as a veterinarian, you would not be smart if you would not advise that to a farmer to do so. So those are things that need to be regulated. Yeah? And And then, of course, of the drugs that are available, you decide in the protocol for the farm with the farmer what are the best ones to use.
Thank you, Herman.
I have numerous perspectives to share, but I think I will rather go into the questions. Anna-Marika, is that all right that we move to the questions?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
Okay, yeah. I'm going to keep it fairly casual. I think it's nicer for a coffee talk to keep it more casual. I know Herman prefers not to have it that way. He likes a more professional, formal, but you can adapt.
Yes, of course, Yellow Pier. Yeah.
So our first question comes from Wim Rush. It's always fantastic to see people learn to use Zoom well, and Wim, you're no exception. I see. His first question is, good morning, Herman. During the code of practice for dairy cattle review, it is promoted that we delay separating dam and calf. That will increase the incidence of chronic diseases and the use of antimicrobials. So it looks like it's a contradiction there a little bit, what's being promoted, right? So delaying dam and calf, and that will increase the use of antimicrobials potentially. And Wim's question is, how do you suggest a more holistic approach?
Holy cow, this is a typical Willem Ruijs question, and which is, Wim, I always see you as one of the best thinkers in the dairy industry. Gosh, I even didn't know that was in the code, and because I think there's a lot of discussion about this still on whether this is something that we can do. Can we separate the calf later from the cow? Because I don't think that there are a lot of farms that are equipped to leave the calf with the cow on the farm. That's you need a completely different design of the farm to make that happen. So if that would be the case, I don't think that we see more problems there. It reminds me always about the dual purpose farming that we had in Costa Rica when I was a manager there. We didn't see more mastitis problems in those cows and other disease problems. But of course, they had to be milked properly after feeding the calf, twice or three times a day. So the milk production would be the same. Only some of the milk then goes to the calf directly. So that's the idea with it. And I don't think you see more problems with it.
So you're saying you're not concerned?
I'm concerned because we can then go to other diseases like Johne's disease and transmission of that from cow to calf. So those are other issues that we have to tackle. But yeah, there are a lot of issues about this. And the biggest one is that farms are, in my opinion, not equipped to do this right now.
I'll just add the option. You feel free to type in questions in the chat, but also if you like to raise your hand, then you can speak. And that sometimes works well for if you want to formulate your question verbally. So any follow-up from that would be appreciated if that is the case. And otherwise, Leighton, I'll just pass it over to you for the next question.
Okay, thanks, JP. Herman, there's another question from Kevin Shenfield. He says, which on-farm mastitis testing is the easiest and accurate test for the average producer?
So you need to culture, and there are we just were asked by Journal of Dairy Science to write a review on that, and we found about 10 different culture systems that all had about the same test characteristics. So it doesn't matter too much what you use to culture on. but you can do it on farm, and farmers like Wim Ruijs, they have experience with it. With an egg incubator that we used for to incubate eggs of chickens, and they keep those cultures at the right temperature, 37 Celsius. But of course, as a farmer, you need to be trained to first do it very hygienically so that you don't get contamination with bacteria from the environment. And then also how to read the results of it after 1 day. So, and one of the problems that we have with that, if you look at the number of mastitis cases on an average farm, let's say you have 25% of the cows get mastitis and you have 100 cows, you get 25 cases a year. So that's 2 cases per month. And maybe on an average Alberta farm, that will be 3-4 cases per month, but still it's not a lot. So it really needs to be done well. Then the question is, if it happens on the weekend and the person that typically does it is not there, okay, what then? Or the farmers also go on vacation, so that also needs to be done. And then you need to have a material that stays good for quite a period. If you have agars, like they call that you need to use, or plates that need to be used within 3 or 4 months, you cannot have many of those, because then they will just go wrong, and cannot be used anymore. So there are some considerations that are very important for that, and that's something I think that should be discussed with the veterinarian in the practice, because there are practices that can do the culture for you. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it.
Herman, just fleshing that out a little bit, I started some of the farms on farm mastitis kits called AccuMast, and they were working great for the farmer. But over time, because the farm had a predominant mastitis infection pressure, I think it was Klebsiella all the time, he was saying that he could recognize the milk, what it was, by the size of the flakes, the color, this kind of thing, and then stopped using the on-farm mastitis kit because he says he could recognize the type of infection by the milk presentation. Do you have any comments on that?
We have examined that often, because you had farmers that said that they could recognize the Staph aureus milk by tasting it, salty milk. And well, I think if you want to get a Staph aureus infection in your body, that's a very good way to do it. So I would not recommend that. But no, it is impossible to distinguish between a Klebsiella infection and a Staph aureus or a streptococci infection from whether the cow is sick, yes or no, or how the milk looks. That's just not good enough. It doesn't work.
JP, did you have any questions you wanted to share?
Yeah, I don't see one in the chat, so I'll throw out one of my own. So it's been raised by some producers as well. We've seen, I don't know the exact reason, and maybe Leighton knows or Herman knows, but we see special formula not being available to producers anymore. And maybe there's a reason for that that's separate from the one I'm going to ask. But some drugs are not being produced anymore due to profit margin. And they may be lower class drugs that should be maybe available for farm usage. How do we deal with that sort of thing? And what do you see there, Herman? Because we want to save the best drugs for human use, but drug companies don't want to produce the cheap drugs because there's no margin for them. That leaves us in a bit of a pickle. And maybe if you have the knowledge to share, so what some producers are wondering, where did our special formula go?
Oh, special formula went because it had a mix of antibiotics in it, and it was just not approved anymore. The license was not approved anymore to be used in animals. So it's not that it's not about profit margin or anything. And yes, I also like special formula, but also as a farmer, you liked it because there was something in there against the inflammation also of so you immediately see a clinical cure effect because it suppresses the inflammation also. So no, it was just withdrawn because of licensing issues. And the result of all that is that we only have a couple of injectors that can be used. I think we only have 2 right now that can be used for clinical mastitis and also for dry cow treatment. However, those that we have are effective and are still good. So of course, if you have something that works, you want to continue using it. But
is one of those not a ceftio base?
Sorry?
Is one of those not a ceftio base?
Yeah, it is. And it may be the XNL or other forms of that, and that may be an issue in the future. So we have limited options, but the options are still good enough to be used for clinical mastitis and for dry cow treatment.
Yeah, and to that, Herman, another solution that I don't know if you shared in your presentation, I might have just missed it, but immune strengthening, right? That's.
Yeah, I know, and we have some of those. I have not encountered any drug yet that came out as sufficiently immune strengthening for cows to prevent clinical mastitis. And so a lot of stuff is sold to dairy farmers for that reason. And a lot of that stuff is not regulated. And we see all kinds of things that people want to sell to dairy farmers. And you should always ask them, okay, what is the proof here? And talk with your veterinarian about it and discuss that. And most often, I would say nearly always, there is no proof whatsoever that this product will actually boost the immune system of the cow. So if you have problems with mastitis on your dairy farm, you need to look at why does that happen on my farm more than on another farm. Yeah, and talk with your veterinarian about it. Don't point immediately at the milking machine for the problems, because it could be another reason to that causes that. So my boss in Utrecht always said, if a farmer points at the milking machine like this, he forgets that there are 3 fingers pointing his own way. Yeah. So look at what is happening there and talk with your veterinarian about that, on what can be done to do that. And don't even think in the beginning of using a magic bullet like an immune stimulator or whatever that is not proven. We see that a lot. If you go in a drugstore, the number of things that are there to help people to increase their immunity and whatever, it's enormous. But none of those products have been tested in humans they have been tested for that they are safe to use so that they don't cause disease, but not really whether they boost the immune system really. And that's the same with those products in cattle.
Yeah, so it sounds like there's some options. I mean, some of the bedding products maybe do keep the bedding more sanitary. The big things are just management, keeping your own bedding sanitary, maybe using a product, but maybe just making sure the manure is out of it, keeping your cow's udders clean. And then what do you say about udder prep, Herman? That's probably a big one.
Yeah, so the first thing always is looking at what bacteria actually cause the mastitis on my farm. And where are those environmental bacteria, or are those ones that are contagious and are spread during milking? So if you particularly find E. coli in your clinical mastitis, that's not spread during milking. That is really caused by the environment. And then you need to look at the bedding. So it is really important to every now and then culture clinical mastitis cases. And if you want to go selectively, of course, you need to culture them all. Yeah?
And that would be working with our veterinarians.
Sorry?
That would be working with our veterinarians to do so.
You have to work with your veterinarians. And then, you know, because it's so important to see what area do those bacteria come from. And then target what you do there. So if other prep, it doesn't make sense if you have Klebsiella or E. coli mastitis. Yeah.
Hey, Herman, we only have about 13 minutes left before this is over, so maybe we'll try to keep the answers brief. There's a few more questions. I'm not saying you're long-winded.
I don't say good luck.
Our next question is here from Wim. And it's partially my own fault too for throwing questions in, Herman, absolutely. Wim's next question is, we should not play one egg sector against the other, but how is the dairy sector doing with antimicrobial usage compared with the others in Alberta and with the rest of the world?
So we have no data on, no good data yet, because the program just started on the beef sector. So I think with the beef sector, we have some problems that need to be fixed before we can really reduce the use of antimicrobials. So the use of antimicrobials in the beef sectors, there's probably more antimicrobials used in feedlots than on dairy farms. Because all animals get treated when they enter the feedlot, because they have been transported. They come from all kind of different farms. They often have been in auction market and mingled and have a lot of stress, and so there's something to work on there. In the swine sector and in the poultry industry, they have worked already for quite a while on reducing antimicrobials and also on banning the use of antimicrobials that are highly critical for humans. So I think the antimicrobial use in itself in the dairy sector is not high, but we can bring it a lot lower. Now, and that, you know, you should really take a lot of credit as dairy farmers for that, because you managed to bring the somatic cell count down from an average of 500,000 to under 200,000. So that means that a lot less others are infected on an average dairy farm. So the management on dairy farms has been enhanced quite a bit in the last decades. Is that short enough, JP?
I think it's a sufficient answer, Herman. Yeah, thanks. Leighton, I don't know if you have a question. I do have one I'd like to ask before the hour is over. I'm going to turn it back to Anna Marika at 10:57, but Leighton, maybe you have something you'd like to bring forward. And I see you answered a question in the chat. Maybe mention that as well.
Yeah, you betcha. So Kevin was just asking me on the chat line how to get some of these mastitis plates like AccuMast. And I was just saying that veterinary clinics like myself or Schuert, or even just directly through the internet, you can buy mastitis, like on-farm mastitis kits. You buy them, those directions of how to use it, and then you're off to the races of finding out what kind of mastitis you have on your farm.
But do it with your veterinarian. Or even if you buy the stuff on the internet, you will really need your veterinarian to explain what to do with the results. And a good protocol needs to be made on, okay, I have that result, then you need to do that. Yeah.
Thanks, Herman. Yeah, that's a very good point. Because as a, just as a dairy veterinarian myself, if if I can stop the mastitis without using antimicrobials, I have tools in my tool bag to do that kind of thing, all the way from vaccines to, udder prep and so forth like that. So, and as a veterinarian, having those results entered into a medical log also helped me on my veterinary professional side as well. So, thank you for saying that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm at, just so my next question, I think, is one that producers and public may be struggling with or will struggle with. It's regarding pitting animal welfare against antimicrobial usage reduction. And that is, if I have an animal that I know will get better using my shot of XNL, but I'm being told I shouldn't, or I should reduce it, or even I'm being told I can't, how will the public handle that, right? J.P. Brower, dairy farmer, can't treat his animal because, and so that poor animal will be suffering. Will there be acceptance of that? Maybe from part of the public, yes, part of the public, no. I'm asking, so will the public understand? And I'm asking the question, will the producers understand? Because a few shots here and there appropriately used should not have a large impact on resistance.
So, JP, this whole argument you're making is building on one big assumption, and that is that there is no good alternative for it. Yeah, and there are. We have the alternatives for it. So, I don't think as a veterinarian, I made an oath to help animals when they're sick. And as a vet and as farmers, you feel the stewards of your land and of your animals. So you want to do the best for your animals. So we need to make sure that we still can use those antimicrobials that we have. And the best way to do it is to minimize antimicrobial use as much as possible, so that public health medical people don't have an argument to say that we should not use those antimicrobials anymore. So we need to do our best and have goodwill, and then we won't get into the situation that we cannot use antibiotics at all anymore.
Thanks for taking that assumption that I was basing that on, Herman. That's good. As long as there always are good alternatives, that maybe is something we want to make sure of. I see here a question, and it's for Leighton. Leighton, as a vet, do you do reviews with your clients to the number of mastitis cases or other diseases that we may experience as producers? And do producers largely welcome the discussion of what can be done to treat and ultimately prevent mastitis?
So what I usually find is most of the time, the bulk tank is quite low and nobody really wants to talk about mastitis on the farm. So we focus on other things that are more pressing to them in the herd health. But when there's an outbreak, it seems like that's all they want to talk about is how to get their bulk tank down and who's the cows. And then we start going through all the data on dairy comp, and we just try to work out, what's the best approach to tackle that. So then that turns into a real consultation type meeting at the computer. So yeah, I mean, most dairy vets, all of them would offer that service and it should be done. I think that doing it on a more regular basis is something to my own fault, because I just don't have prescribed times where I'm thinking, oh, like today is the day that we're going to discuss this, and I probably should, and I don't, but it's a good idea. I hope that helps the.
So if I can mention one thing, the problem that you then encounter when you have this outbreak is that you often don't have the data. Because then there are no culture results, so you don't know whether it's contagious or environmental. And often the number of cases are not well recorded. So because you want to find out whether these are typically chronic cases or new cases, whether they occur early in the lactation or during the peak of the lactation or at the end of the lactation, whether they occur in the heifers or in the older cows, because heifer mastitis is a problem in itself. So it is really important on a regular basis to culture clinical mastitis cases. But of course, yeah, it's then when there's no problem, it's often not a priority, and then you get in that situation.
Yeah, that's right, Herman. That's a very good point. Having the data really, really helps me at my job. A second thing that really helps is just having accurate data, because sometimes data that's entered in wrong or incomplete gives me the wrong view of what's going on in the farm. So if you're going down the pathway, let's say you're going to get Lactanet and use that constant testing, that's really good. But if there's 3 months data and we're looking over a whole year, it's not very good.
Yeah, Herman, last question here is a follow-up to that, and that is, what tools do you use, Herman, to help facilitate these kinds of conversations if there's a crisis?
So if there's a crisis, what I do is always do it together with the herd veterinarian. So we go to the farm together, and the first thing is walking through the farm together and then sitting with the farmers and their staff and talk about it. And then the first thing we decide is, do we have enough data to decide what needs to be done here? And then it is very important to make quantitative objectives, to really say, okay, here we are. We have now, in the last month, we had 10 cases in 100 cows. We want to go to 5 cases in a month and to 2 cases in 2 months. Yeah, because then you can really measure whether what you're doing is effective, yes or no. Of course, this is seasonal often. Yeah, I always love to be called for a high somatic cell count problem in August, because I know it will go down anyway, and I will get the credit for it. Yeah, but it's and then what we see then, it will go down, and then in the summer it will go up again because nothing has been done to prevent it. So we need to keep the seasonality in mind.
Okay, Herman, I'm going to cut it off there. We already took a minute away from Anna Marika. Really appreciate the discussion. I could have gone easily for another half hour or longer, but they have to stop us somewhere, right? So I'll pass it to Anna Marika here. Thanks so much.
Thank you, JP. And actually, I mean, just to put Herman on the spot one more time, that question that was just asked about the tools that you have, right? You were mentioning that in the context of a crisis situation, but could you also elaborate a little bit on what tools would be available or from our research side, or how would you, if it's not there yet, how would you suggest we could implement more tools to be more on the preventative side on this?
So the one thing is, we need to look at different aspects, but what I often see is that the milking machine is not maintained as it should be. So the car goes more often to the dealership to be checked than the milking machine is. So, and that's where do we earn our money on a dairy farm? With that milking machine. So that should be done very, very frequently. So the regular maintenance is really really important. So recording the cases that you have so that you know where you are, because 2 cases per month in a 100 cow farm doesn't look like a lot, but it's still 25%, 24% over a year. So if you have 1 a week, it is 50% of the cows. So recording is so important for all of that, and really reading the somatic cell count reports as well, and checking that with your veterinarian. And yes, it often doesn't happen because fertility is the #1 reason why you call the veterinarian on the farm for a regular basis, but really have those discussions about it. And then talk with other producers about it. And visit other farms. That is so important. because you can learn a lot from your colleagues. Those are just some of the aspects, Annemarieke.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. And thank you all so much for joining us today. I think it was very interesting to hear that discussion on antimicrobial use and resistance in the dairy industry. And thank you, Herman, for also sharing some practical knowledge for producers to think about and to maybe improve their practices around antimicrobial use on their farms. So thank you, Herman, but also Leighton and JP. It was a very interesting and nice conversation to listen to, I think. And thank you, everyone, for attending and for all the questions that you put in. And we will send all of today's registrants a link to the recording of this coffee talk, as well as to any relevant research papers related to today's topic. And we will also include a survey that you will see, I think, right at the end of this Zoom meeting. And we would really appreciate if you could all fill this out, because it would really help us to improve these sessions and other extension activities. So next week's coffee talks will be starting on Tuesday and will be on Wednesday and Thursday as well. Will be about dairy calf and cow feeding. And so, yeah, we hope that many of you will join us next week again. So thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.